When Claire pushed open the door to her ex-husband's burned-down cabin, she expected nothing but ashes and smoke. Not 8 starving children hiding under a torn blanket, and definitely not all of them calling her mom. They were strangers. They were terrified, but somehow they already knew her name. Claire had rebuilt her life after divorcing Daniel 5 years earlier. The marriage had ended under tense circumstances, and they hadn't spoken since. When news reached her that Daniel's remote cabin had burned down and he was presumed dead, Claire felt nothing but a dull ache for what once was. The local authorities had contacted her as next of kin. Despite their divorce, someone needed to handle the paperwork, and there was no one else. As Claire's car wound up the mountain road toward the cabin, she had no idea she was driving toward a discovery that would change everything. The first thing Claire noticed was the smell, charred wood and melted plastic hanging heavy in the mountain air. Daniel's cabin had been modest but sturdy, tucked away where the forest grew thick and neighbors were miles apart. Now it was a skeleton of blackened beams and collapsed walls. Claire parked her sedan and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. She hadn't expected to feel anything, yet seeing the destroyed cabin stirred something in her. "Let's get this over with," she murmured to herself. Reaching for her purse, the gravel crunched under her boots as she approached the wreckage. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze. The fire marshal had already cleared the scene, determining it was likely an electrical fire. No foul play suspected, just a tragic accident that had claimed Daniel's life. Though they hadn't recovered his body yet, Claire stood at what had once been the front steps, surveying the damage. Half the roof had collapsed inward. The stone chimney stood eerily intact among the destruction. She wouldn't need to go inside. The official had told her she just needed photos for the insurance claim. She raised her phone to take the first picture when she heard it, so faint she almost convinced herself it was the wind. A whimper, then another, like a wounded animal or... Claire lowered her phone, listening intently. There it was again, definitely crying. "Hello?" she called out, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet forest. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped abruptly. Then whispers, too quiet to make out the words. Claire followed the sound, circling the cabin carefully. The crying seemed to be coming from beneath the partially collapsed back porch. Kneeling down, she peered into the shadows and saw what looked like a metal door, a storm cellar. "Is someone down there?" she called again. Claire reached for the handle, expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily. The heavy door creaked as she pulled it open, revealing a set of concrete stairs descending into darkness. "Hello?" Claire called, squinting to see. "I'm coming down, okay? I'm not going to hurt you." She used her phone's flashlight to illuminate the steps as she descended cautiously. The air grew cooler, damp with the scent of earth and something else, unwashed bodies and fear. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, Claire gasped. Huddled against the far wall were children, 8 of them, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, covered in soot and dirt. They were thin, clearly undernourished, with hollow eyes that watched her warily. The oldest, a boy of about 14, moved in front of the others protectively. His hand gripped a kitchen knife, and his eyes held a mixture of fear and determination. "Please don't take us," he growled, his voice cracking. "We didn't do anything wrong." Claire raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "I'm not here to take you anywhere," she said gently. "My name is Claire. I just want to help. Are you hurt? How long have you been down here?" The children exchanged glances. A girl of about 12 placed a restraining hand on the boy's arm. "Since the fire," she answered quietly. 3 days ago." 3 days? Claire repeated, horrified. "Without food? Without help?" The oldest boy still hadn't lowered the knife. "He told us never to trust strangers, to stay hidden if anything happened." "He?" Claire asked. "Dad?" the boy said, his expression challenging her to dispute it. Before Claire could respond, movement caught her eye. The smallest child, a girl no more than 3 years old with tangled blonde hair and huge blue eyes, had emerged from behind the older children. She took tentative steps toward Claire, her face lighting up with recognition. "Mommy?" she whispered, reaching out a tiny hand. "You came back." Claire froze, a chill running down her spine despite the summer heat. "What did you say?" The little girl came closer, her smile growing. "Mommy came back." The other children were staring now, their expressions changing from fear to confusion to something like hope. "That's not," Claire began, but a boy of about 5 cut her off. "It's Mom," he exclaimed, jumping up from where he'd been sitting. "Dad said you'd come back someday." Claire shook her head, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm not your mother. I've never seen any of you before." But even as she said it, she was struck by an odd familiarity about some of the children. The oldest boy had eyes that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't place who. The 12-year-old girl held herself with a posture Claire recognized from somewhere. The oldest boy had lowered the knife slightly, his brow furrowed as he studied her face. "You're Claire. Claire Mitchell." "Yes," she confirmed, surprised. "How did you know that?" "Dad has pictures," the 12-year-old girl explained. "And documents. He said you had to go away to protect us, but you'd come back someday." Claire felt her knees weaken. She leaned against the wall for support. "I don't understand. Who is your father?" "Daniel," the oldest boy said. "Daniel Mitchell." That's impossible. Daniel and I never had children. We were divorced 5 years ago. I haven't seen him since." The children exchanged confused glances again. The littlest girl had reached Claire now and wrapped her arms around Claire's legs, looking up with complete trust. "Mommy," she said again, her voice certain. Despite her confusion, Claire felt a protective instinct surge within her. These children were clearly hungry, frightened, and alone. Whatever was going on, they needed help first, explanations later. "When did you last eat?" she asked, gently stroking the little girl's tangled hair. "Dad brought food down before the fire," the oldest boy said. "It ran out yesterday." Claire nodded, making a decision. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I have some granola bars and water in my car. I'm going to get them, and then we need to get you all somewhere safe, get you checked out by a doctor." Panic flashed across the oldest boy's face. No doctors, no authorities. Dad said they'd separate us if they found us." "Marcus," the 12-year-old girl pleaded, "we're hungry, and Emma isn't feeling well." She nodded toward another girl, perhaps 7 years old, who sat limply against the wall, her face flushed. Claire knelt down to eye level with Marcus. "I promise I won't let anyone separate you," she said, her voice firm despite the absurdity of making such a promise to children she'd just met. "But you need food, medical attention, and a safe place to stay. Will you trust me? Please?" Marcus held her gaze for a long moment, searching for something in her eyes. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he finally nodded. "Okay," he said reluctantly, "but you have to promise we stay together." "I promise." Claire helped the children out of the cellar one by one. In the daylight, their condition was even more alarming. Their clothes were filthy and too small. Several had minor burns and cuts, presumably from the fire. The youngest ones clung to the older children, eyes wide with uncertainty. As they emerged into the sunlight, Claire noticed a backpack tucked beside the cellar entrance. "Is that yours?" she asked Marcus. He nodded, reaching for it. "Dad made us pack emergency bags." Claire helped him retrieve it, and he unzipped it with trembling hands. Inside were documents in a waterproof sleeve, a few photographs, some clothing, and a first aid kit. He said if anything ever happened, we'd need these, Marcus explained, handing her the documents. Claire took them, her heart racing as she slid out the contents. Birth certificates, school records, medical forms, all listing the same parents, Daniel Mitchell and Claire Mitchell. "This isn't possible," she whispered, staring at her own name on document after document. "These are forgeries." "Dad said you'd be confused at first," the 12-year-old girl said, watching Claire's face carefully. "I'm Lucy, by the way. You named me after your grandmother." Claire's head snapped up. "How did you know my grandmother's name was Lucy?" "Dad told us stories about you all the time. About your childhood, how you met, your favorite lullaby." As if on cue, the little girl who had called Claire Mommy began to hum a familiar tune. The same lullaby Claire's mother had sung to her. The same one Claire had often hummed to herself when stressed or sad. Claire felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She and Daniel had never had children. They'd tried, unsuccessfully. After multiple rounds of fertility treatments, the stress had contributed to their marriage falling apart. The little girl was still clinging to her legs, looking up with complete trust. Despite everything, Claire felt a surge of protectiveness. "Let's get you all something to eat," she said, pushing her confusion aside temporarily. "Then we'll figure this out." She led the children to her car, retrieving the granola bars and water bottles she kept for hiking. It wasn't nearly enough for 8 hungry children, but it would help until she could get them somewhere with proper food. As the children ate, Claire examined the documents more carefully. According to the birth certificates, the children ranged in age from 3 to 14, with Marcus being the oldest. If these were real, it would mean Claire had given birth to him 15 years ago when she was 24 and already married to Daniel, but that was impossible. She would remember giving birth. "Dad said you might not remember us at first. He said you hit your head, and that's why you had to go away. The doctors thought being around us might be too confusing for you while you healed." Claire stared at him, speechless. "Marcus, I never hit my head. Daniel and I were married, yes, but we never had children. We divorced 5 years ago, and I haven't seen him since." Marcus's expression hardened. "You're lying," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Dad wouldn't lie to us, not about something this important." Claire sighed, realizing she wouldn't get anywhere by contradicting everything they believed. "How about this? We get you all somewhere safe with food and showers, and then we'll sort through all of this together. Okay? The children looked to Marcus, who seemed to be their de facto leader. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. But we stay together, he insisted again. You stay together, Claire agreed. The smallest children fell asleep almost immediately as Claire drove down the mountain, exhausted from their ordeal. The older ones watched the scenery pass in silence, occasionally exchanging whispers. Lucy sat in the front passenger seat, clutching the backpack with their documents. She kept glancing at Claire, as if trying to reconcile the woman beside her with stories she'd been told. Dad has a picture of you in his wallet, she said. It's from your wedding day. You're wearing a dress with little flowers on it, and your hair is shorter. Claire gripped the steering wheel tighter. That detail was accurate. Lucy, she said carefully, how long have you lived with Daniel? Lucy considered the question. Always, she said. I mean, I was a baby when you left, so I don't remember you. Marcus and Ellie remember you the most. Claire glanced in the rearview mirror at Marcus, who was staring out the window, his jaw set. As they approached town, Claire made a decision. She couldn't take 8 unknown children to her small apartment. She needed help sorting this out, but she was reluctant to involve the authorities immediately, given Marcus's fear of being separated. She pulled into the parking lot of a motel on the outskirts of town. Wait here, she instructed. I'm going to get us some rooms. Marcus tensed. Are you coming back? The question broke Claire's heart a little. Whatever the truth was, these children had been through a trauma, and now they were placing their trust in a stranger they believed to be their long-lost mother. Yes, Marcus, she said firmly. I'm coming back. Inside the motel office, Claire rented 2 adjoining rooms, paying cash to avoid questions about why she had 8 children with no luggage. When she returned to the car, the relief on the children's faces was palpable. Once inside the motel rooms, Claire helped the younger children wash up while Lucy took inventory of their meager belongings from the backpack. Marcus stood guard by the door, still wary despite his tentative trust. I'm going to order pizza, Claire announced. And then, while we eat, I'd like you all to tell me about yourselves. The children's faces lit up at the mention of pizza. For a moment, they looked like ordinary kids, excited about a treat, not mysterious children who had appeared in her life claiming she was their mother. As they waited for the food to arrive, Claire learned their names and ages. Marcus, 14, Lucy, 12, Ellie, 10, James, 8, Emma, 7, Oliver, 5, Sophia, 5, apparently Oliver's twin, and Lily, 3. When the pizza arrived, they fell upon it like they hadn't eaten in days, which, Claire realized with a pang, they practically hadn't. She made sure everyone had enough, especially the smallest ones. Now, she said gently when their initial hunger had been satisfied, I'd like to understand more about your life with Daniel, about the cabin, about school, about everything. The children exchanged glances, seeming to decide who would speak. It was Lucy who finally took the lead. We've always lived in the cabin, she began. Dad homeschools us. He says the schools around here aren't good enough. Does he work? Claire asked. He works on his computer, Marcus said. Something with investing, and he gets checks from the government for us. Claire frowned. What do you mean, checks from the government? For being our guardian, Lucy explained. Since you're not there, a cold feeling settled in Claire's stomach. If Daniel was receiving government assistance for these children using her name, do you ever leave the cabin? She asked. Go into town, see other people? The children shook their heads. Dad says it's not safe, Marcus explained, that people might try to take us away if they knew we were there without you. What about doctors? When you get sick, Dad takes care of us, Lucy said. He has medical books and supplies. Claire's concern deepened. Can I see the photos? Claire asked, gesturing to the backpack. The ones of me that Daniel kept. Lucy nodded, reaching into the bag and pulling out a worn envelope. Inside were several photographs. Her wedding photo, just as Lucy had described. A picture of her on a hike, smiling at the camera. A candid shot of her reading on the porch of the cabin. But there were other photos too, ones that made no sense. Claire holding a baby, looking down with a mother's adoration. Claire with a toddler on her hip, another child by her side. Family photos with all of them together. Claire, Daniel, and children of various ages. These aren't real, Claire whispered, examining the photos more closely. They were good, professional quality photoshopping, but now that she was looking carefully, she could see the inconsistencies. The lighting was slightly off in some. In others, her hairstyle didn't match the apparent timeline. What do you mean they're not real? Marcus demanded, looking over her shoulder. Marcus, I need you to listen to me carefully, Claire said, meeting his gaze steadily. I was married to Daniel, but we never had children together. These photos have been altered to make it look like I was there with you, but I wasn't. Marcus snatched the photos from her hand. You're lying, he said, his voice breaking. Dad said you might not remember us at first. that your mind was protecting itself. But you're our mom. You have to be. The younger children were watching with wide, frightened eyes. Lily, the 3-year-old, began to cry, climbing into Lucy's lap for comfort. "Why are you saying these things?" Lucy asked, her voice small. "If you're not our mom, then who are you? Why did Dad tell us about you our whole lives?" Claire wished she had answers. She looked around at the 8 faces watching her, some suspicious, some frightened, some hopeful. "Here's what we're going to do," she said decisively. "We're going to stay here tonight, get some rest. Tomorrow, I'm going to make some calls, try to figure out what's going on. I know a police officer I trust. She can help us without immediately involving child services." Marcus tensed at the mention of police. I promised you would stay together," Claire reminded him. "But Marcus, this situation is complicated." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion was clearly catching up with him. The younger children were already drooping, full bellies and clean faces, making their days without sleep nearly impossible to fight any longer. "Let's get everyone ready for bed," Claire suggested gently. "We can talk more tomorrow when we're all rested." She helped the younger children brush their teeth with the complimentary toothbrushes from the motel, arranged the sleeping arrangements so the smallest ones were comfortable, and turned down the lights. As the children settled in, Lily insisted on Claire sitting beside her bed. "Sing the song, Mommy," she requested sleepily. The special song. Claire hesitated, then began to hum the lullaby, her lullaby, the one her grandmother had taught her mother, who had taught it to Claire. One by one, the children drifted off to sleep, all except Marcus, who watched Claire from his bed with wary, confused eyes. "I don't understand what's happening," he said quietly when the others were asleep. "But I know what I remember. I remember you reading me stories. I remember you brushing my hair off my forehead when I had a fever." Claire's heart ached for him. "Marcus, I wish I had answers for you, but whatever is going on, I promise I will help you figure it out. I won't abandon you, any of you." He studied her face in the dim light, looking for truth or deception. When Marcus finally fell asleep, Claire sat in the chair by the window, watching over the children who had appeared in her life so suddenly, claiming her as their mother. Her mind raced with questions and possibilities, none of them making complete sense. Officer Jenna Reyes arrived at the motel just as Claire was helping the younger children get dressed. She was in plainclothes, as Claire had requested, to avoid frightening the children. "This is the strangest call I've ever received, Claire," Jenna said quietly after Claire had introduced her simply as a friend who was going to help them. 8 children who think you're their mother? What exactly is going on here?" Claire shook her head. "I was hoping you could help me figure that out. I can't just turn them over to the system, Jenna. They're terrified of being separated, and honestly, after what I've seen, I'm worried about what would happen to them too." Jenna glanced at the children, who were eating the breakfast Claire had picked up from a nearby diner. "Let me see the documents." Claire handed over the backpack. As Jenna examined the contents, her expression grew increasingly troubled. "These look legitimate at first glance," she said. "Birth certificates, school registration forms, even medical records, all listing you and Daniel Mitchell as the parents. But there are inconsistencies. The hospital listed on Marcus's birth certificate closed 20 years ago. The doctor who supposedly delivered Lucy doesn't exist in any medical registry. So they're forgeries," Claire said, feeling a strange mix of relief and new concern. "Good ones," Jenna confirmed. "Not good enough to fool a thorough investigation, but certainly good enough to pass casual inspection." "Claire, if Daniel was using these to collect benefits, we're talking about serious fraud." "But who are these children, really?" Claire asked, lowering her voice so the kids couldn't hear. Jenna's expression was grim. "I have some suspicions, but I need to make some calls. Can you keep the children here for a few more hours? I want to check some missing persons reports, talk to some colleagues who work in child trafficking." "Child trafficking?" Claire repeated, horrified. Jenna nodded soberly. 8 children living in isolation with forged documents? It raises serious concerns. After Jenna left, Claire tried to keep the children occupied, learning more about their lives. Their education had been spotty at best. Daniel had apparently taught them to read and basic math, but their knowledge of the outside world was limited. They spoke of rare trips into town for supplies, always staying close to Daniel, never talking to strangers. When Jenna returned a few hours later, her expression confirmed Claire's worst fears. "We need to talk privately," she said. Claire nodded. "Marcus, can you watch the little ones for a few minutes?" Jenna and I need to discuss something." Marcus nodded, though his eyes were suspicious. "You're coming back, right?" "Of course," Claire assured him. In the motel hallway, Jenna didn't waste time. "I've been making calls all morning. These children match descriptions of children who have gone missing over the past decade. Not high-profile abductions, but cases where the circumstances were murky. Children removed from unstable homes by family members who later couldn't be located. Children whose foster placements fell through under suspicious circumstances. Claire felt sick. Are you saying Daniel kidnapped these children? Not exactly, Jenna said. He seems to have been running some kind of underground adoption network, taking children from situations where they were vulnerable, parents with addiction issues, overwhelmed foster care providers, even some teen mothers who weren't ready to parent but didn't want traditional adoption. But why use my name? Why tell them I was their mother? Jenna's expression softened with sympathy. He needed a mother on the paperwork to collect certain benefits. Using your identity, someone he had been legally married to, would raise fewer red flags than inventing a person from scratch. And children need a mother figure, even an absent one. It gave them someone to attach their hopes to. Claire leaned against the wall, feeling overwhelmed. So none of them are actually related to each other, or to Daniel, or to me. I can't be certain without DNA tests, Jenna admitted. But based on the cases I've found, it seems unlikely. Daniel appears to have created a fictional family using your identity. Claire thought of the children inside the motel room, 8 innocent lives caught up in Daniel's deception. What happens now? Jenna sighed. Officially, I should report this immediately. These children need to be properly identified, their cases investigated. Some may have family members looking for them, but they'd be separated, Claire said, distressed. Put into the system, after everything they've been through. That's the standard procedure, Jenna acknowledged. But given the unusual circumstances, I might be able to buy us a little time. A few days to learn more, to prepare the children for what's coming. They've already experienced one trauma with the fire and Daniel's disappearance. An abrupt separation now could cause additional psychological harm. Even though I just met them, even though this whole situation is insane, they believe you're their mother, Jenna said gently. For now, maybe that's what they need you to be. When they returned to the motel room, the children were waiting anxiously. Claire could see the fear in their eyes. Is she going to take us away? Marcus asked bluntly, positioning himself in front of the younger children. No, Marcus, Claire assured him. Not right now, but we do need to talk about what happens next. The children gathered around as Claire explained what she and Jenna had discovered, that Daniel had not been truthful about many things, that their family had been constructed rather than born. So you're not our mom? Lily asked, her little face crumpling in confusion. Claire's heart broke. How did you explain something like this to a 3-year-old? Then who is our mom? James asked, his 8-year-old brow furrowed. That's something we're going to try to find out, Jenna said gently. But we might not have the same mom? Lucy asked, the implications dawning on her. We might not be. Real brothers and sisters? Family isn't just about blood, Claire said firmly. You've been raised together, you love each other. That makes you real brothers and sisters in all the ways that matter. Marcus had been silent, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke, his voice tight with emotion. You're saying Dad stole us, that our real parents might be out there somewhere, looking for us. It was Jenna who finally responded. We don't know everyone's situation yet, Marcus. Some of you may have family searching for you. Others might have come from situations where there was no one able to care for you properly. What we do know is that Daniel created false documents and kept you isolated, which suggests he knew what he was doing wasn't legal. But he took care of us, Ellie insisted, speaking up for the first time in a while. He made sure we had food and clothes and books. He taught us things. Yes, he did, Claire acknowledged. And I'm sure he cared about you. But what he did was still wrong. The children fell silent, processing this challenging new reality. Their entire understanding of their family, their history, their very identities had been upended in a matter of hours. What happens now? Lucy finally asked. For the next few days, you'll stay with me, Claire said, making the decision even as she spoke. Officer Reyes Jenna is going to help us learn more about each of your backgrounds. And together, we'll figure out what happens next. You promise we'll stay together? Marcus pressed, still not entirely trusting. Claire hesitated, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep. I promise I will do everything in my power to make sure you're safe and cared for. It wasn't the absolute guarantee Marcus wanted, but it was the most honest answer Claire could give. The road ahead was uncertain for all of them. With Jenna's help, Claire moved the children to her apartment that afternoon. It was cramped with 9 people in a space designed for 1, but they made it work. Sleeping bags on the floor, couch cushions arranged into makeshift beds. Claire gave up her bedroom to the youngest children, taking the living room floor for herself. Over the next days, a picture began to emerge of Daniel's operation. Using Claire's identity, he had collected welfare benefits, tax credits, and even educational stipends for homeschooling the children. He had kept them isolated to prevent questions, moving periodically to avoid scrutiny. Most disturbingly, Jenna discovered that Daniel had used forged adoption papers to obtain new birth certificates for the children, effectively erasing their original identities. It would take time and resources to untangle the truth about where each child had come from. Some of them might never know their original families. Jenna admitted one evening after the children were asleep. The trails are old, the documentation destroyed or falsified. Claire looked at the sleeping children, their faces peaceful in slumber despite the chaos of their lives. In just a few days, she had grown attached to them, their unique personalities, their resilience, their hope that somehow things would work out. Marcus, the protector, always watching out for the others even as he struggled with his own sense of betrayal. Lucy, sensitive and observant, trying to hold everyone together with her quiet strength. Ellie, artistic and dreamy, finding escape in the sketchbook Claire had given her. James, curious about everything, asking endless questions about the world. Emma, sweet but fragile, her health more delicate than the others. The twins, Oliver and Sophia, mischievous and energetic, bouncing back from trauma with childhood's remarkable elasticity. And little Lily, still calling Claire Mommy, despite the explanations, too young to fully understand what was happening. "What will happen to them, Jenna?" Claire asked softly. "Once you make your official report?" Jenna's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "They'll be placed in emergency foster care while their cases are investigated. Given their numbers and ages, they'll almost certainly be separated." The thought sent a physical pain through Claire's chest. That can't happen. They've already lost everything familiar. They can't lose each other too. The system isn't designed to keep sibling groups this large together, Jenna said gently. "Especially when they're not biological siblings," Claire insisted. "They've been raised as brothers and sisters their whole lives. Separating them now would be another trauma." Jenna studied her friend's face. "Claire, what are you suggesting?" Claire took a deep breath, surprised by the certainty she felt. "I want to keep them, all of them, at least temporarily, until better arrangements can be made." "That's a huge undertaking," Jenna said carefully. 8 children, most of whom have complex histories we don't even fully understand yet. And you have no legal standing, you're not related to them, not their guardian in any capacity. "But they believe I am," Claire said. "Daniel created this fiction where I'm their mother, and right now that fiction is the only stability they have left. What if we use that temporarily? What if I become their emergency foster placement while the investigations continue?" Jenna looked skeptical. "It doesn't usually work that way. There are procedures, home studies, background checks, which you can help expedite." Claire pressed. "Jenna, you've seen them. You know separating them right now would be devastating." Jenna was silent for a long moment, considering. "I'll see what I can do," she finally said. "But Claire, you need to be prepared. This is temporary at best. Some of these children may have family members with legitimate claims, and even if they don't, adopting 8 children as a single parent, the courts would be very unlikely to approve that." "I understand," Claire said, though her heart rebelled at the thought of eventually giving them up. "I just want what's best for them right now." As Jenna prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Claire, I have to ask, why are you doing this? You didn't know these children a week ago. They came into your life through a bizarre deception. You could walk away, let the system handle it. Why take on this enormous responsibility?" Claire looked back at the sleeping children, considering the question. "Because when that little girl called me Mommy, something inside me responded. Because they need someone on their side, someone who sees them as individuals, not case numbers. Because," she paused, trying to articulate the feeling that had been growing in her since she found them in that cellar. "Because maybe this is what I was meant for." Jenna nodded, understanding something in Claire's expression that Claire herself was only beginning to recognize. "I'll make those calls first thing in the morning." After Jenna left, Claire settled onto her makeshift bed on the living room floor, surrounded by sleeping children. Despite the uncertainty, despite the bizarre circumstances that had brought them into her life, she felt a strange sense of purpose. The next morning, as Claire was making breakfast for 8 hungry children, a logistical challenge in her small kitchen, her phone rang. It was Jenna. "I've been making calls since dawn," her friend said without preamble. "I found someone in family services willing to consider an emergency placement with you, given the unusual circumstances. But Claire, there's something else you need to know." The gravity in Jenna's voice made Claire step into her bedroom, away from the children's ears. "What is it?" "Daniel's body wasn't found in the cabin fire," Jenna said. "That's not unusual in itself. Fire can be extraordinarily destructive, but I've been looking into his financial records and there was a large cash withdrawal from his account the day before the fire, and his truck is missing." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. "You think he faked his death? That he's still out there somewhere?" "It's a possibility we have to consider," Jenna confirmed. "Especially given the nature of what he was doing. Identity theft, welfare fraud, possibly child trafficking. If he suspected authorities were closing in, he might have staged the fire as a way to disappear." Claire finished the thought. but he left the children behind. In a secure storm cellar with emergency supplies, Jenna pointed out. Maybe he planned to return for them once things cooled down. Or maybe he panicked when he realized his scheme was about to be exposed. Claire thought of the children in her kitchen, eating cereal and toast, slowly adjusting to their new temporary reality. Should I be worried, she asked, for their safety? For mine? I don't have any evidence suggesting Daniel is violent, Jenna said. But given everything else we've discovered, I'd recommend caution. Keep the children close. Be aware of your surroundings. I'll have patrols in your area increased, just as a precaution. After hanging up, Claire returned to the kitchen, seeing the children with new eyes. Not just as victims of a bizarre deception, but potentially as targets of a man who might still be out there, watching, waiting. Everything okay? Marcus asked. Claire forced a smile. Yes, just some arrangements for your temporary stay here. Officer Reyes is helping make everything official. But as she helped the younger children with their breakfast, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the story that had begun in that burned cabin was far from over. Later that day, as Claire was helping Emma with a puzzle, the little girl suddenly became lethargic, her face flushing with fever. I don't feel good, she mumbled, leaning heavily against Claire's side. Claire felt her forehead. It was burning hot. How long have you been feeling sick, Emma? Since the fire, Lucy answered for her sister. She was coughing in the cellar. Dad was supposed to get her medicine, but then the fire happened. Claire's concern deepened. Emma had seemed quieter than the others, less energetic, but Claire had attributed it to the stress of their situation. Now she realized the child might have been ill all along. I'm going to take her temperature, Claire said, retrieving the thermometer from her bathroom. When she returned, Emma had curled up on the couch, her breathing slightly labored. The thermometer read 103.2, alarming for a child her age. Emma needs to see a doctor, Claire announced, already reaching for her phone. Marcus tensed immediately. No doctors. Dad said, I know what Daniel said, Claire interrupted firmly. But Emma is seriously ill. She needs medical attention, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. The rest of you will stay here with Lucy in charge while I take Emma to the urgent care clinic. She called Jenna as she gathered Emma's jacket and her own purse. I need to take Emma to a doctor. Her fever is dangerously high. Can you come stay with the others? I'll be there in 10 minutes, Jenna promised. But Claire, you should know that taking her to a doctor means questions, medical records. The system will become involved. I understand, Claire said, looking at Emma's flushed face. But her health comes first. We'll deal with the consequences. At the urgent care clinic, the questions began immediately. Name, date of birth, medical history, insurance information. Claire provided what she could from the documents Daniel had created, aware that she was perpetuating a fiction but uncertain what else to do in the moment. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s, examined Emma thoroughly. She has a serious respiratory infection, she explained to Claire. Probably bacterial pneumonia. She'll need antibiotics, rest, and careful monitoring. If her breathing gets worse, she may need hospitalization. Claire nodded, stroking Emma's hair as the child dozed on the examination table. I'll take care of her. The doctor studied Claire's face. You said you're her mother? It's complicated, Claire admitted. I'm currently her guardian. There's an ongoing family situation. Something in the doctor's expression suggested she understood more than Claire was saying. I see. Well, regardless of the situation, this child needs medication and care. I'll write the prescriptions, but I want to see her again in 2 days to check her progress. As they waited for the prescriptions to be filled, Claire sat with Emma on her lap, the child's hot forehead pressed against her neck. Despite the circumstances, despite the fact that they had known each other less than a week, the feeling of protectiveness that surged through Claire was overwhelming. You're going to be okay, she whispered to Emma. When they returned to the apartment, Jenna pulled Claire aside while Lucy helped get Emma settled in bed. While you were gone, I got a call from my contact in family services, she said. They're willing to consider you for temporary emergency placement of the children, given the unusual circumstances. But there will need to be home visits, background checks, interviews. It's going to be intrusive. Whatever it takes, Claire said without hesitation. These children have been through enough. I'm not going to let them be separated if there's anything I can do to prevent it. That night, as Claire administered Emma's medicine and checked on all the children before bed, she found Marcus sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at one of the photographs from Daniel's backpack. Can't sleep? She asked gently, sitting across from him. He shook his head, still looking at the photo, one of the manipulated images showing Claire with the children. I keep trying to remember if these moments were real, if you were really there, or if Dad somehow made us believe you were. Why would he lie to us about something so important? Why would he tell us you were our mother when you weren't? Claire considered the question carefully. I think. Maybe he knew you needed a mother figure. even an absent one, someone to attach your hopes to, someone to explain why he was raising you alone, and maybe using my identity made his legal deceptions easier. But Marcus, I don't think he expected us to actually meet. I think the fire, his disappearance, that wasn't part of his plan." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "So what happens now? When they figure out where we all really came from, will they send us back? Separate us?" It was the question Claire had been dreading. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I promise you this. I will fight to keep you all together, to make sure you're safe and cared for." Marcus studied her face, looking for truth or deception. "Why? You don't even know us. You didn't ask for any of this." "No, I didn't," Claire agreed. "But sometimes the most important things in life aren't the ones we plan for. They're the ones that find us when we least expect it." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Try to get some sleep, okay? We've got a lot to figure out tomorrow." As Marcus headed to his makeshift bed, Claire remained at the kitchen table, looking at the photograph he had left behind. The image had been skillfully manipulated to show her with the children, a happy family moment that had never actually happened. Yet something about it stirred a strange longing in her. These children weren't hers by birth or by choice, but in the short time they had been in her life, they had awakened something in her. A maternal instinct she had thought long buried after her failed attempts to conceive with Daniel. During their marriage, she and Daniel had tried desperately to have children, enduring fertility treatments, disappointments, the strain it put on their relationship. Now, 5 years after their divorce, she found herself suddenly responsible for 8 children who had been told their whole lives that she was their mother. It was as if the family she and Daniel had failed to create together had somehow materialized in the most unexpected and convoluted way. The next morning, Emma's condition had worsened despite the medication. Her breathing was labored, and her fever had spiked again. "We need to take her to the hospital," Claire decided, already gathering the little girl's jacket. "This is beyond what we can manage at home." The other children watched anxiously as Claire wrapped Emma in a blanket. Even Marcus didn't protest the medical intervention this time. "I'll stay with the others," Jenna offered, having stopped by to check on their situation. "You focus on getting Emma the care she needs." At the hospital, things moved quickly. Emma was admitted immediately, her oxygen levels concerning enough that the doctors wanted her monitored closely. As the medical team worked to stabilize her, a nurse approached Claire with admission paperwork. "We'll need her complete medical history," the nurse explained. "And we'll need to confirm your relationship as her parent or guardian." "I have temporary guardianship," Claire said, which wasn't entirely a lie given Jenna's efforts to arrange emergency placement. "Her medical history is incomplete. She was being raised by my ex-husband, who is now unavailable." The nurse gave her a look that suggested she recognized there was more to the story, but her priority was Emma's health, not untangling complicated family dynamics. "The doctor wants to start a blood transfusion," she explained. "Emma's tests show she's anemic, which is complicating her recovery from the pneumonia. We'll need to type and cross-match her blood. Are you willing to be tested as a potential donor? Family members are often the best match." Claire blinked in surprise. She wasn't related to Emma, at least, she had no reason to think she was. But the need was urgent, and if she could help, of course, whatever she needs. As she followed the nurse to have her blood drawn, Claire wrestled with a growing sense of unease. How long could she maintain this precarious situation? Hours later, as Claire sat beside Emma's hospital bed watching the little girl sleep, a doctor entered the room with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Mitchell?" he said, checking his notes. "I'm Dr. Patel. I've been reviewing Emma's case and the blood work." Claire nodded, bracing herself for bad news about Emma's condition. "First, I want to assure you that Emma is responding well to treatment," the doctor said. "The antibiotics are beginning to work, and the transfusion has helped with her anemia. We expect a full recovery, though it will take time." "Thank you," Claire said, relief washing over her. "That's wonderful news. There is something else, though," Dr. Patel continued, his expression thoughtful. "When we tested your blood as a potential donor, we ran a standard compatibility panel. The results were unexpected." Claire tensed. "What do you mean?" "You're not just compatible as a donor," Dr. Patel explained. "The genetic markers in your blood indicate a first-degree biological relationship with Emma. In other words, you appear to be her biological mother." Claire stared at the doctor, certain she had misheard. "That's not possible. I've never given birth. There must be some mistake." Dr. Patel's expression was sympathetic but certain. "The markers are quite clear, Ms. Mitchell. Without a full DNA test, I can't state it with absolute certainty, but the blood typing and genetic markers we did analyze strongly suggest a maternal relationship." Claire looked from the doctor to Emma, sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed. It wasn't possible. She would remember giving birth. She would remember having a child. "I don't understand," she whispered, more to herself than to the doctor. "Family situations can be complicated," Dr. Patel said kindly, misinterpreting her confusion. "If you'd like, we can arrange for a formal DNA test to confirm the relationship. It might provide clarity for legal and medical purposes." Claire nodded numbly. "Yes, please. I'd like that." After the doctor left, Claire sat beside Emma's bed, trying to make sense of what she had just learned. It wasn't possible that Emma was her biological daughter. Yet the medical tests suggested otherwise. What could explain it? As Emma slept, Claire called Jenna, stepping into the hallway to avoid being overheard. "The doctor says I'm biologically related to Emma," she said without preamble. "That I'm likely her mother." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's unexpected," Jenna finally said. "Could there be a mix-up with the tests?" "They're running a formal DNA panel to confirm," Claire said. "But the doctor seemed pretty certain about the blood markers." "Jenna, this doesn't make any sense. I've never had children." "Did you and Daniel pursue fertility treatments?" Jenna asked carefully. "Yes, for years," Claire confirmed. "Multiple rounds of IVF, all unsuccessful. The stress of it was part of what led to our divorce. But I never carried a pregnancy to term." "What about embryos?" Jenna pressed. "Were there embryos created during your IVF attempts?" Claire's mind raced back to those painful years of fertility treatments. "Yes, we had several embryos frozen. But after the divorce, I assumed they were destroyed. Daniel never mentioned them again, and I wanted to move on from that chapter of my life." Jenna was silent for a moment. "Claire, I need to look into something. Can you stay with Emma at the hospital for now? I'll check on the other children, then do some digging." "Of course," Claire agreed. "Emma needs me here anyway." "But Jenna, what are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet. Let me check some things first. I'll call you as soon as I know more." After hanging up, Claire returned to Emma's bedside, studying the sleeping child's face with new eyes. Could it be true? Could this little girl somehow be her biological daughter? Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mom?" she murmured, still half asleep. The word, which had seemed so wrong just days ago, now sent a jolt through Claire. What if, through some impossible twist, this child really was hers? "I'm here, sweetheart," she said softly, stroking Emma's hair. As Emma drifted back to sleep, Claire's mind whirled with questions and possibilities. If Emma was somehow her biological child, what about the other children? What had Daniel done? The answers began to emerge the next day, when Jenna arrived at the hospital with a manila envelope in hand. Her expression was grim. "I found something," she said, taking a seat beside Claire in the small waiting area down the hall from Emma's room. "It wasn't easy and it's not complete, but it starts to explain what might have happened." She opened the envelope and spread several documents on the small table between them. "First, the fertility clinic where you and Daniel created embryos. I contacted them about their records from your treatment." Claire frowned. "Wouldn't that be confidential? How did you get them to share that information?" "I didn't exactly," Jenna admitted, "but I found this in the public record." She pointed to a document, a news article about the clinic from 5 years ago. Claire scanned it quickly. "A nurse fired for ethical violations?" "Keep reading," Jenna urged. As Claire read further, her blood ran cold. The nurse had been terminated for helping a patient access stored embryos without the proper consent forms. The clinic had declined to press charges after the nurse agreed to surrender her license, and the names of the patients involved had been kept confidential. "You think this was about our embryos?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jenna nodded grimly. "The timing fits. It was right after your divorce. And there's more." She slid another document across the table, a letter. It was addressed to Claire, dated 3 years ago, from someone named Margaret Everett. "Who is Margaret Everett?" Claire asked, not recognizing the name. "The nurse from the fertility clinic. This letter was returned to sender. It had been mailed to your old address, after you'd already moved." Claire unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began to read. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, you don't know me, but I worked at Clearwater Fertility Clinic during your treatment there with your husband, Daniel Mitchell. I am writing to unburden my conscience about something that has weighed on me heavily for the past 2 years. In the months following your divorce, Mr. Mitchell approached me privately. He explained that you had both wanted children desperately, that the failure to conceive had contributed to your divorce, and that he was still determined to have the family you had planned together. He asked for my help in accessing the embryos you had created and stored at our facility. I knew it was wrong. I knew proper protocols required your consent as well. But Mr. Mitchell was persuasive, and I was going through a difficult time in my personal life that clouded my judgment. I helped him complete the paperwork as if both of you had consented. 3 of your embryos were transferred to a surrogate that Mr. Mitchell had arranged privately. I do not know the surrogate's identity or what became of the pregnancies. I was terminated from the clinic shortly after when my actions were discovered. though Mr. Mitchell's name was kept out of the investigation due to his lawyer's intervention. I have lived with the guilt of my actions every day since. You deserve to know that embryos created with your genetic material were used without your knowledge or consent. I do not expect or deserve your forgiveness, but I hope this information might provide answers you may have been seeking. With deepest regrets, Margaret Everett Clare looked up from the letter, her hands shaking. He stole our embryos, she whispered. Jenna nodded soberly. And if Emma's blood work is any indication, at least one of those embryos resulted in a successful pregnancy. Emma may be your biological daughter, Claire, and possibly not the only one. The implication hit Claire like a physical blow. If Daniel had arranged for surrogates to carry embryos created with her eggs, then some of the children, perhaps 3 of them, according to the letter, could be biologically hers. I need to know which ones, if any, besides Emma. I need DNA tests for all of them. I've already started that process, Jenna assured her. After you called about Emma, I got emergency approval for testing for all 8 children. We should have results within a few days. Claire stood and paced the small waiting area, trying to process this bombshell. He stole my chance to be a mother, she said, anger building within her. He created children with my genetic material without my knowledge, raised them on lies, told them I had abandoned them. I don't know, Jenna said softly. But what matters now is what happens next. Claire stopped pacing, a new resolve forming within her. If any of these children are biologically mine, I want custody. That's likely, given the circumstances. Jenna agreed. But what about the others? The ones who aren't biologically yours? Claire didn't hesitate. All of them, Jenna. I want all of them. They've been raised as siblings their whole lives. They've already lost their home, the only parent they've known. I won't let them lose each other too. Jenna's expression was concerned. That's going to be a complicated legal battle, Claire. For the children who aren't biologically yours, who may have been obtained through questionable means, and even without that, convincing a court to grant a single woman custody of 8 children, some with no biological connection. I don't care how complicated it is, Claire insisted. These children have been through enough. They deserve stability, security, and love. Jenna studied her friend's face, recognizing the determination there. You've really fallen in love with them, haven't you? Yes, she admitted. I have. And biological or not, they need me. And maybe I need them too. The DNA results came back 3 days later, while Emma was still in the hospital but improving steadily. Jenna brought the report to Claire personally, sitting beside her in the now familiar hospital waiting area. 3 positives, she said without preamble. Emma, Marcus, and Lucy all show a maternal genetic match to you. Claire absorbed this information, emotions washing over her in waves. 3 of the children, the oldest boy, the 12-year-old girl, and 7-year-old Emma, were biologically hers. Created from embryos she and Daniel had made during their marriage, carried by unknown surrogates, born without her knowledge. Marcus and Lucy, she whispered. That's why they seemed familiar somehow. The timing fits, Jenna confirmed. Based on their ages, they would have been born from those embryos transferred after your divorce. And the others? Claire asked. Have you learned anything about where they came from? Jenna nodded, her expression somber. We've identified Ellie and James. They were removed from their biological mother's care due to her drug addiction. She later died of an overdose. The paperwork said they were placed with a relative, but that relative appears to have been fictional, created by Daniel to gain custody. And the twins, Lily? Still working on it, Jenna admitted. But from what we can piece together, it seems Daniel was specifically targeting vulnerable children, those in the system already, those whose parents were struggling with addiction or other issues. He created fictitious family connections to gain custody, then used your identity to build a paper trail that would allow him to collect benefits. Claire felt sick at the thought of what Daniel had done, not only to her by stealing her embryos, but to these other children and their families. Yet amid the horror of his deception, a strange truth was emerging. She was, in fact, the mother of 3 of these children. What happens now? She asked. For Marcus, Lucy, and Emma, your biological connection creates a strong case for custody. Jenna explained. There might be questions about the circumstances of their conception and birth, but your genetic relationship is clear. For the others, it's more complicated. We'll need to determine if there are any living relatives with valid claims. If not, you could petition for adoption, but that's a lengthy process with no guarantees. Claire thought of the children waiting at her apartment, of the promises she had made them. I won't separate them, Jenna. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, they stay together. In the past week, Claire had become something she never expected to be, a mother to 8 children who needed her desperately, and she had no intention of walking away from that responsibility, no matter how it had been thrust upon her. As she returned to Emma's hospital room to share the news of what they had discovered, Claire steeled herself for the conversation ahead. How did you explain to a child that, yes, you were their biological mother, but you hadn't known they existed until a week ago? How did you explain the complex ethical violations that had led to their birth without making them feel unwanted or like a mistake? Emma was sitting up in bed, her color much improved, working on a drawing with crayons the nurses had provided. She looked up when Claire entered, her face lighting up. "Mom, look what I made." The word mom no longer felt like a lie. It felt like a truth that had been hidden from both of them, now finally revealed. "It's beautiful," Claire said, sitting on the edge of the bed to admire the colorful drawing. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Better," Emma said. "The nurse said I might get to go home soon. Is it true?" "Home." The word carried such weight now. "Yes, probably in a day or two, if you keep improving," Claire confirmed. "Emma, there's something important I need to talk to you about. Something I've just learned." Emma set her crayons down, sensing the seriousness in Claire's tone. "Is it about Dad? Did they find him?" "No, not about Daniel," Claire said gently. "It's about you, and Marcus, and Lucy, and about me." She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words to explain something so complex to a 7-year-old. "Do you know what DNA is, Emma?" Emma nodded. "It's the stuff inside you that makes you look like your parents. We learned about it from Dad's science books." "That's right," Claire said. "Well, the doctors here tested your DNA, and they found something surprising. Something that Daniel never told any of us." Emma watched her face intently, waiting. "I am your biological mother," Claire said softly, "and Marcus's and Lucy's. Not just because Daniel said so, but because you actually have my DNA. We are connected in a very real way." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? For real? Not just what Dad said?" "Really," Claire confirmed. "It's complicated, and there's a lot I'm still figuring out myself. But yes, you, Marcus, and Lucy are biologically my children." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then her face crumpled slightly. "But if you're only really the mom of me and Marcus and Lucy, what happens to the others?" Emma pressed, worry evident in her voice. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep all of you together," Claire promised. "It might be complicated, and it might take time, but that's what I'm fighting for." Emma studied Claire's face, as if looking for signs of deception or uncertainty. Then, apparently satisfied with what she saw, she nodded. "Good, because we belong together, all of us." The simple confidence in her statement brought tears to Claire's eyes. "Yes," she agreed. "You do." When Emma was finally released from the hospital, Claire brought her home to an apartment transformed. The other children had cleaned and organized, and arranged Emma's bedding in a special place of honor. It was touching to see how they had pulled together, how their love for each other transcended the revelations about their biological connections. That evening, after Emma was settled and the younger children were in bed, Claire sat down with Marcus and Lucy. It was time they knew the truth as well. "I wanted to talk to you both privately," she began, "about what we've discovered." Marcus's expression was guarded, as it often was when difficult topics arose. Lucy looked nervous but curious. "So it's true?" Lucy asked. "The DNA tests show you're our biological mother." Claire nodded. "Yes, yours, Marcus's, and Emma's. But the way it happened, it wasn't what Daniel told you. I didn't leave you, or forget you, or abandon you." She explained as gently as possible about the embryos created during her marriage to Daniel, about his theft of those embryos after their divorce, about the surrogates who must have carried and given birth to them without Claire's knowledge. "So we were born from your eggs and Dad's stuff," Marcus said bluntly, "but another woman carried us." "Yes," Claire confirmed. "I don't know who she was or if it was different women for each of you. Those records have been difficult to trace." Lucy was quiet, absorbing this information. "So you didn't give birth to us. You didn't raise us as babies, but you're still our biological mother." "Yes," Claire said. "I know it's confusing, but the connection is real, even if the circumstances were unconventional." "And what about the others?" Marcus asked, echoing Emma's concern. Claire repeated what she had told Emma. "There will be legal hurdles, investigations, possibly even challenges from relatives we haven't identified yet. But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to keep this family intact." Lucy reached across the table and took Claire's hand. "I'm glad you found us," she said simply. Marcus remained quiet, still processing everything he had learned. But there was a softening in his expression, a lowering of the defensive walls he had maintained since Claire first found them. As the days passed, Claire and the children settled into a tentative routine. She took a leave of absence from her teaching job to focus on their needs full-time. Jenna continued to help navigate the legal complexities of their situation, arranging for temporary guardianship while the investigation into Daniel's activities continued. The children began to open up more, sharing stories of their life with Daniel, the isolation, the constant moves, the rules about not talking to strangers or authorities. It became clear that they had been living a life of secrecy and fear. "Dad always said people would try to take us away if they knew about us," Lucy explained one evening as she helped Claire with dinner. "That's why we couldn't go to regular school or have friends over. He said it was because the papers weren't right," James added from where he was setting the table. "But I think now he meant because he took us when he wasn't supposed to." Claire's heart ached for these children who had been raised on lies, kept hidden from the world, taught to fear the very authorities who might have helped them. Was it grief over their failed attempts to have children? A desire to punish Claire by creating the family they had wanted without her knowledge? Whatever his motives, the damage was done. Now it fell to Claire to help these children heal, to give them the stability and security they deserved. One evening, Claire returned home from a meeting with the family court judge to find a note slipped under her apartment door. "You took what's mine. Stay out of it. This isn't over." The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel was alive, and he was watching. Claire stared at the note in her hand, a chill running down her spine. She immediately called Jenna, who arrived within 20 minutes, taking the note carefully with gloved hands. "We'll check for prints, but I doubt he'd be that careless," Jenna said, sealing the note in an evidence bag. "This changes things, Claire. If Daniel is alive and making threats, we need to consider the safety of the children." Claire glanced toward the living room, where the children were watching a movie, blissfully unaware of this new development. "Do you think he would try to take them back? Harm them?" "We don't have any evidence that Daniel has been violent in the past," Jenna admitted, "but people can become unpredictable when cornered. He's facing serious charges if caught: identity theft, welfare fraud, possibly child trafficking. That's significant prison time." The implications settled heavily on Claire. "What do we do?" "First, we increase security," Jenna decided. "I'll arrange for patrols in your area, get someone to install better locks on your doors and windows. You should be careful about your routines, vary your schedules, be aware of your surroundings." Claire nodded, though the thought of living under such caution was daunting. "Should I tell the children? They think Daniel died in the fire." Jenna considered this. The older ones, perhaps. They might notice the increased security measures, and they should be alert to potential contact. But the younger ones, it might just frighten them unnecessarily. After Jenna left to make arrangements for the additional security, Claire gathered Marcus and Lucy in the kitchen while the other children continued watching their movie. "There's something you need to know," she said quietly. "Something that might be difficult to hear." She showed them the note, watching their expressions carefully as they read it. "Dad's alive?" Lucy whispered, her eyes wide with confusion. Marcus's reaction was more complex, a mixture of relief, anger, and suspicion. "He faked his death," he said flatly. "Let us think he was dead, left us in that cellar." "It seems that way," Claire confirmed. "Officer Reyes is investigating, but yes, it appears Daniel survived the fire, or more likely, was never in it to begin with. He may have staged it as a way to disappear when he realized authorities might be closing in on his activities. But he left us behind," Lucy said, hurt evident in her voice. "He just abandoned us." "He left you in the storm cellar with emergency supplies," Claire pointed out, trying to be fair despite her own anger at Daniel. "Perhaps he intended to return for you once it was safe. Or maybe he was using us as bait," Marcus said darkly, "to draw you in." Claire hadn't considered that possibility, and it sent a new wave of unease through her. "Whatever his intentions," Claire said firmly, "what matters now is keeping all of you safe. Officer Reyes is arranging additional security, and we need to be extra careful for a while. That means staying together, being aware of strangers or unusual situations, and telling me immediately if you see or hear anything concerning." The teenagers nodded solemnly, understanding the seriousness of the situation. "Do the others need to know?" Lucy asked, glancing toward the living room where their younger siblings were laughing at the movie. Claire shook her head. "Not yet. Let's not frighten them unnecessarily. But you two need to be aware, to help me keep everyone safe." As the days passed with no further contact from Daniel, the temporary guardianship order granted Claire legal authority to care for all 8 children while the courts sorted through the complexities of their situation. She enrolled the older ones in school, their first experience with formal education, and arranged for a tutor to help the younger ones catch up to their age-appropriate levels. The children thrived under Claire's care, gradually emerging from the shell of isolation Daniel had created. Marcus joined the soccer team. Lucy discovered a love for science, devouring books from the library. Ellie's artistic talents blossomed with proper supplies and encouragement. Even the youngest children showed remarkable resilience, adapting to their new circumstances with the flexibility of youth. But beneath this surface of normalcy, legal storm clouds were gathering. The court-appointed investigator had completed her report on the children's backgrounds, and the results were troubling. While no living relatives had been identified for Ellie and James, their mother was confirmed deceased, their father unknown. Potential family connections had emerged for the twins and for Lily. Sophia and Oliver's maternal grandmother has filed for custody, Jenna informed Claire one evening after the children were in bed. And Lily's situation is even more complicated. It appears she was not legally relinquished by her biological mother, who has now been located and is considering her options. Claire felt the news like a physical blow. They want to separate them? After everything they've been through? The family court tends to favor biological connections when available, Jenna explained gently, especially in cases where the children were obtained through questionable means, as appears to be the case here. The court has to consider what's in each child's best interest. For children with biological family members willing and able to care for them, that often means reunification. Claire paced her small living room, mind racing. What about Marcus, Lucy, and Emma? They're biologically mine. Surely I have rights there. Yes, your case for them is strongest, Jenna confirmed, though there will likely be questions about the circumstances of their conception and birth. But Claire, even if you gain full custody of your biological children, that still leaves the others in limbo. I won't accept that, Claire said firmly. These children belong together. They're siblings in every way that matters. Jenna considered for a moment. There's one option, but it's a long shot. You could petition for adoption of all 5 non-biological children, arguing that separating them from their siblings would cause additional trauma. It would be an uphill battle, especially against biological family claims, but it's not impossible. Then that's what we'll do, Claire decided without hesitation. The legal battle that followed was exhausting, expensive, and emotionally draining. Claire hired a family law attorney specializing in complex custody cases, using her savings and a loan against her modest retirement account to cover the mounting legal fees. The court ordered psychological evaluations of all 8 children, appointed a guardian ad litem to represent their interests, and scheduled a hearing to determine their long-term placement. Meanwhile, Claire continued to care for them under the temporary guardianship order, trying to shield them from the legal turmoil as much as possible. As the hearing date approached, Claire received another note, this one left on her car windshield in the grocery store parking lot. You'll lose. They were never yours to keep. Walk away now. The implied threat sent a fresh wave of fear through Claire. She reported it to Jenna immediately, but like the previous note, it yielded no useful evidence. The night before the hearing, Claire sat at her kitchen table reviewing documents with her attorney, Elizabeth. The children were finally asleep after a day of barely contained anxiety. Be prepared for tough questions tomorrow, Elizabeth warned. The opposing counsel will try to paint you as opportunistic, possibly even complicit in Daniel's schemes. They'll question your motives, your ability to care for 8 children as a single mother, your financial stability. Claire nodded, steeling herself. I understand, but the truth is on our side. 3 of them are biologically mine, conceived without my knowledge or consent, and all of them need stability, not more disruption. Elizabeth's expression was sympathetic but cautious. The biological connection to Marcus, Lucy, and Emma is our strongest argument. For the others, we're relying heavily on the trauma testimony from Dr. Brennan, arguing that separating siblings at this point would cause significant psychological harm. And the reports from their teachers, their therapist, Claire added. Everyone who has observed them in the past months agrees that they're thriving, adjusting well, forming healthy attachments. Yes, we have strong character witnesses, Elizabeth agreed. But Claire, I need you to be realistic. The odds of keeping all 8 children together, given the biological family claims for some of them. It's a difficult case. I understand the odds, Elizabeth, but these children have beaten the odds their whole lives. We're not going to give up now. The courtroom was intimidatingly formal, with its polished wood and sense of solemn purpose. Claire sat beside Elizabeth at one table, while representatives for the various interested parties, child services, the twins' grandmother, Lily's biological mother, occupied others. The children waited outside with a court-appointed supervisor, to be called in only if the judge deemed their testimony necessary. Claire had prepared them as best she could, explaining that the court was trying to determine what was best for each of them, but reassuring them that she would fight to keep them all together. Judge Ilana Watkins, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose, called the hearing to order. This is an unusual and complex case, she began. We have 8 children, various biological connections, allegations of fraud and identity theft, and competing claims for custody. My priority is to determine what arrangement serves the best interests of these children, both individually and collectively. The testimony began with the court investigators, who outlined the children's backgrounds as far as they had been able to determine. The clinical recitation of facts, embryo theft, questionable adoptions, welfare fraud using Claire's identity, felt surreal to Claire, as if they were discussing strangers rather than the children she had come to love so deeply. Next came the opposing arguments. The attorney for the twins' grandmother emphasized blood ties and family heritage. These children were essentially stolen from their family through fraudulent means, he argued. They deserved to know their true cultural background, their extended family, their biological roots. The representative for Lily's biological mother painted a sympathetic picture of a young woman who had been coerced into a temporary placement that became permanent against her wishes. Ms. Diaz was 18, homeless, and in crisis when she agreed to let Daniel Mitchell care for her newborn temporarily. She never intended to relinquish her parental rights permanently, and she has since stabilized her life. Throughout these arguments, Claire tried to maintain her composure, though each word felt like a personal attack. These people were strangers to the children, whatever their biological connections might be. They hadn't held Lily through nightmares, or celebrated when the twins mastered reading, or created the family traditions that now structured their lives. When it was Elizabeth's turn to present Claire's case, she began with the strongest argument, the biological connection to Marcus, Lucy, and Emma. Claire Mitchell is not just a compassionate caregiver who stepped up in a crisis, Elizabeth argued. She is the biological mother of 3 of these children, conceived through embryos stolen from her without her knowledge or consent. DNA testing has confirmed this. She detailed the evidence they had gathered about Daniel's embryo theft, including the letter from the former fertility clinic nurse. Ms. Mitchell was robbed of the opportunity to know her biological children for years. Now that she has found them, it would be an unconscionable second injury to separate them from her. Elizabeth then turned to the psychological arguments for keeping all 8 children together. Dr. Brennan, a respected child psychologist who has evaluated all 8 children, will testify to the deep sibling bonds they have formed. These children have been raised together from infancy, believing themselves to be full siblings. They have already endured the trauma of learning their family history was built on deception, the loss of the only father they knew, and the discovery of their true origins. Separating them now would inflict additional, unnecessary trauma. The questioning and cross-examination of witnesses continued for hours. Claire testified about finding the children, learning of her biological connection to 3 of them, and her commitment to providing a stable, loving home for all 8. Ms. Mitchell, the attorney for the twins' grandmother, asked during cross-examination, "How do you propose to support 8 children on an art teacher's salary? The financial responsibility is enormous. I've taken a better-paying position with the school district's administrative office," Claire answered calmly. "I've also received a settlement from the fertility clinic for their negligence in allowing access to my embryos without consent. Between these resources, careful budgeting, and the support network I've built, the children's needs will be fully met. How will you manage the logistical challenges of 8 children with different schools, activities, medical needs? Don't you think some of these children might receive more individualized attention in smaller family units?" Claire refused to be baited into an emotional response. These children have been functioning as a unit their entire lives. The older ones help with the younger ones, not out of obligation but out of love. We have established routines that work for our family, and I have arranged flexible work hours to accommodate their schedules. More importantly, the children support each other emotionally in ways that no outside caregiver could replicate. As the questioning continued, Judge Watkins interrupted. "I'd like to hear from the children themselves," she announced. "Not all of them, but certainly the older ones who can articulate their preferences. Bailiff, please ask Mr. Marcus Mitchell to come in." Claire's heart raced as Marcus entered the courtroom, looking smaller and younger in his dress clothes than his 14 years. He approached the witness stand with the wary confidence that was his hallmark, his eyes finding Claire's briefly before focusing on the judge. After being sworn in, Marcus answered the judge's questions about his understanding of the proceedings with surprising maturity. "And what is your preference, Marcus?" Judge Watkins asked directly. Understanding that the court must consider many factors, where would you prefer to live and with whom? Marcus didn't hesitate. "With Claire," he said firmly. "With my mother and my brothers and sisters." "You understand that Claire is your biological mother," the judge clarified, "but not the biological mother of all your siblings? DNA doesn't make a family. Claire found us when we were hungry and scared. She brought us to safety. She fought for us. She's not just our mom because of some papers or some DNA test. She's our mom because she came back, because she stayed." The simplicity and power of his statement brought tears to Claire's eyes. She had never heard Marcus express his feelings so openly. Lucy's testimony was equally moving. When asked about the possibility of the younger children being placed with biological relatives, Her response was immediate and passionate. "We've already lost everything we thought we knew," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Our home, our sense of safety, the truth about our origins. The only constant has been each other, our family. Breaking us apart now would be cruel," whose testimony seemed to affect the judge most deeply. "Dad made us think Mom was like a ghost, someone who existed but couldn't be with us. But she's real. She found us and she takes care of us and she loves us. All of us, not just me and Marcus and Lucy. If you take my brothers and sisters away, it will break my heart." By the time the last witness had been questioned, the hearing had lasted nearly 6 hours. Judge Watkins called a recess to consider her ruling, instructing all parties to return the following morning. That night, Claire held the children close, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. The testimony had been powerful, the evidence of their family bonds compelling. But would it be enough to overcome the legal presumption in favor of biological connections? The next morning, as they prepared to return to court, Claire found Marcus sitting alone on the apartment balcony, staring out at the city below. "Nervous?" she asked, joining him. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. "What if she separates us? What if the twins and Lily are sent away? Then we'll visit them," Claire said firmly. "We'll maintain those connections, those relationships, no matter what. We'll be family even if we can't all live under the same roof." Marcus finally looked at her. "He's still out there, isn't he?" Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Probably. But he can't hurt us anymore, Marcus. Whatever happens today, we face it together." When Judge Watkins delivered her ruling that afternoon, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. Claire held her breath as the judge adjusted her glasses and began to speak. "This case presents extraordinary circumstances that require careful consideration of competing interests," Judge Watkins began. "On one hand, we have biological connections that normally warrant significant weight in placement decisions. On the other, we have psychological bonds and established family relationships that cannot be dismissed lightly." She reviewed the evidence methodically, acknowledging the claims of biological relatives, while also emphasizing the unique situation of these 8 children who had been raised as siblings their entire lives. Having heard testimony from the children themselves, from psychological experts, and from all interested parties, I find that in this specific case, the children's best interests are served by maintaining the family unit they have known all their lives. Claire felt a surge of hope, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Therefore, I am granting full legal custody of Marcus Mitchell, Lucy Mitchell, and Emma Mitchell to their biological mother, Claire Mitchell," the judge continued. "Furthermore, I am approving Ms. Mitchell's petition for adoption of Ellie, James, Oliver, Sophia, and Lily, finding that separation from their siblings would cause unjustifiable psychological harm." Relief washed over Claire in a dizzying wave. They had won. All 8 children would stay together under her care as a legal family. However, Judge Watkins added, raising a finger, "I am ordering structured visitation for the biological relatives of Oliver, Sophia, and Lily to be implemented gradually with appropriate therapeutic support. These children deserve to know their biological heritage and extended family, even as they remain with the siblings who have been their constant family." It was a reasonable compromise, Claire thought, one that acknowledged biological connections while prioritizing the children's emotional well-being and family integrity. As the judge concluded the hearing, Claire turned to Elizabeth, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "You did the hard part. You love these children enough to fight an impossible battle for them. They're lucky to have you." When Claire emerged from the courtroom, the children were waiting anxiously in the hallway. One look at her face told them everything they needed to know. "We won?" Lucy asked, voice trembling with hope. Claire nodded, opening her arms as the children rushed toward her. "We're staying together," she confirmed. "All of us." The celebration that followed was joyous and relieved, 8 children and 1 adult embracing in the formal courthouse hallway, drawing curious and sympathetic looks from passers-by. As they walked to the car, Claire noticed a figure watching from across the street, a man in a baseball cap, partially obscured by a newspaper. She felt a chill of recognition, even at this distance. Daniel. Their eyes met briefly across the busy street. In that moment, Claire saw something unexpected in his expression, not anger or menace, but a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't fully decipher. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. It was the last time Claire would ever see him. Later, investigators would find evidence that Daniel had fled the country, using falsified documents to establish a new identity abroad. The legal proceedings against him continued in absentia, but for Claire and the children, his disappearance marked the closing of a painful chapter. The first year as a legal family was both challenging and rewarding. Claire sold her apartment and used the settlement money from the fertility clinic to purchase a modest but spacious house on the outskirts of town, room enough for 8 growing children, with a large backyard and a sturdy oak tree perfect for climbing. The transition wasn't always smooth. The older children sometimes struggled with their complex feelings about Daniel. The younger ones adjusted more easily, embracing Claire as their mother with the resilience of childhood. As promised, Claire facilitated relationships with the biological relatives of Oliver, Sophia, and Lily. The twins' grandmother became a welcome presence in their lives, offering cultural connections to their Hispanic heritage that Claire couldn't provide. Lily's biological mother, a young woman named Marisol, who had stabilized her life after early struggles, became something of a big sister figure, visiting regularly but supporting the family structure Claire had established. School presented its own challenges. The children, having been isolated and homeschooled by Daniel, had significant educational gaps. Marcus and Lucy tested below grade level initially, while the younger ones needed special support to catch up to their peers. But with tutoring, patience, and their own determination, they began to thrive academically. There were financial considerations too, even with Claire's new administrative position and careful budgeting, providing for 8 children strained resources. She started a small side business selling her artwork, surprised and gratified when it began to generate meaningful income. The older children contributed as well, Marcus with lawn mowing jobs, Lucy with babysitting. Through it all, the bond between the children remained their greatest strength. They moved through the world as a unit, defending each other, supporting each other, their shared history creating a foundation that no outside force could shake. 6 months after gaining legal custody, Claire brought up an idea that had been forming in her mind. "What would you think about rebuilding the cabin?" she asked during a family dinner. "Not to live in full-time, but as a weekend place, a refuge, something that's ours, built from the ground up." The children exchanged glances, considering the suggestion. The cabin held complicated memories for them. It had been their prison in some ways, keeping them isolated from the world, but it had also been the only home they had known. "Could we make it different?" Ellie asked. "Like, not exactly the same as before?" "Absolutely," Claire assured her. "This would be our design, our vision." "I think," Marcus began, then paused, gathering his thoughts. "I think that would be good, taking something that represented all the lies and secrets and turning it into something honest and open." The others nodded in agreement, warming to the idea. And so began the project that would occupy their weekends and school breaks for the next year, the transformation of Daniel's burned cabin into something new. They started by clearing the debris, a symbolic as well as practical first step. Each child participated according to their abilities, from Marcus hauling heavy beams to little Lily collecting smaller pieces of debris in her bucket. Claire hired professionals for the structural work, but the design and finishing touches were a family affair. The new structure was built on the foundation of the old, but with significant changes: more windows to let in light, an open floor plan to foster togetherness, a wraparound porch for enjoying the mountain views. The children each had input on the design, from Ellie's art studio nook to James's built-in bookshelves to the twins' shared loft space. As the cabin took shape, so too did their identity as a family. On the day the cabin was completed, they gathered for a ceremony of sorts. Each family member brought something symbolic to place inside: a drawing, a found stone, a written wish for their future together. Claire had commissioned a wooden sign for the entrance, carved with words they had chosen together: ashes, roots. "Why that name?" a neighbor had asked. "Because we rose from the ashes of a difficult past," Lucy explained. "But we're putting down new roots together." It was during this first weekend in their completed cabin that Claire shared another idea that had been forming. "I've been thinking," she said as they roasted marshmallows around the new fire pit in the backyard. "This place is special. It represents our journey from something broken to something beautiful. What if we shared that with others?" The children looked at her curiously, waiting for her to continue. "There are so many children in the system, especially older ones and sibling groups, who have trouble finding permanent homes," Claire explained. "What if we created a program here, using this space when we're not using it ourselves? A place where siblings could come for retreats, where they could just be together without the constraints of the system. A place that offers hope that families can stay together, even when it seems impossible." The idea resonated deeply with the children, who had so nearly been separated themselves. Over the next months, they worked with Claire to develop the concept, reaching out to social services, securing necessary permits, creating a formal nonprofit organization. The first group of siblings came to Ashes, Roots the following summer, 3 brothers aged 12, 10, and 8, who had been placed in separate foster homes due to lack of available placements for sibling groups. They arrived wary and disconnected, having been apart for nearly 6 months. Under the guidance of Claire and her children, who served as both hosts and powerful examples, the brothers began to reconnect. They hiked in the mountains, swam in the nearby lake, created art projects, and simply existed together in a space designed for healing and togetherness. "This is like what happened to you?" the oldest brother asked Marcus one evening. Marcus nodded. "We almost got split up too, but our mom fought for us." "You're lucky," the boy said wistfully. "We are," Marcus agreed, "but things can change. That's what this place is about, showing that different futures are possible." By the end of the weekend, the brothers had strengthened their bond, created memories to sustain them until they could be together permanently, and gained advocates in Claire and her family, who would continue to support their case for reunification. It was the first of many such weekends. Over the next few years, Ash's Roots became known in child welfare circles as a unique resource, part retreat center, part advocacy organization, all focused on keeping siblings together when possible and maintaining their connections when separation was unavoidable. 5 years after finding the children in that burned cabin storm cellar, Claire stood on the porch of Ash's Roots, watching as her family prepared for a dedication ceremony. The program had grown beyond their initial vision, now serving dozens of sibling groups each year and advocating for policy changes to prioritize keeping brothers and sisters together. The property had expanded too, with additional cabins built to accommodate more families, a community center for gatherings and workshops, and walking trails winding through the mountain forest. As Claire observed her children, no longer the frightened, malnourished group, but confident, purposeful young people, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the strange, difficult journey that had brought them together. Marcus, now 19 and in his first year of college, was setting up chairs for the ceremony, his movements confident and assured. Lucy, 17, was arranging flowers with Ellie, their heads bent together in conversation. James, 13, was organizing program materials with his typical attention to detail. Emma, 12 and fully recovered from the illness that had nearly claimed her life, was helping the twins, now 10, hang decorative lanterns from the trees. And Lily, 8 going on 80 in her old soul wisdom, was directing everyone with cheerful authority. As the dedication ceremony began, Claire took her place among her children, now joined by the extended family they had created, the twins' grandmother, Lily's biological mother, the social workers and advocates who had supported their journey, and many of the siblings who had found hope and healing at Ash's Roots. Daniel's deception, intended to serve his own mysterious ends, had inadvertently created the family Claire had always wanted, but never found in conventional ways. The lie had become truth, the trauma had become love, the strangers had become family. As Marcus stepped forward to speak, his voice strong and clear in the mountain air, Claire felt a surge of pride and wonder. This remarkable young man, biologically her son, though she hadn't known it for the first 14 years of his life, embodied the resilience and hope that defined their family. 5 years ago, our family was born from a lie, Marcus began, addressing the gathered crowd. We were told stories about who we were, where we came from, who loved us. When those stories crumbled, we thought we had lost everything. He paused, looking back at Claire and his siblings. But what we discovered was that family isn't defined by the stories others tell about us. It's defined by the choices we make, the love we share, the way we hold each other up when the world tries to tear us apart. Claire listened, tears forming in her eyes, as Marcus articulated the journey they had taken together, from the ashes of deception to the roots of authentic connection. As the ceremony continued, with each child speaking their part, Claire reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed 8 frightened, hungry children and 1 bewildered woman into a family bound by choice rather than circumstance. The children now called her Mom without hesitation, not because of Daniel's lies, but because she had earned the title. The story they told about themselves was no longer one of abandonment and deception, but of resilience and chosen family. As the formal dedication concluded and the gathering transitioned to a celebration, Claire found a quiet moment alone on the porch, watching her family mingle with the community that had embraced them. A small hand slipped into Claire's, and she looked down to find Lily beside her, brown eyes serious in her young face. "Are you happy, Mom?" the child asked with the direct simplicity that was her hallmark. Claire smiled, squeezing the small hand in hers. "Very happy, sweetheart. Are you?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I'm glad you found us in the fireplace. I'm glad you're our real mom now." "Me too," Claire said softly. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." And as she rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the family she had never expected but now couldn't imagine living without, Claire knew it was absolutely true. What had begun as a shocking discovery in a burned cabin had become the greatest blessing of her life. 8 children who called her Mom,